How's it going, everyone? My name is Forby. Today we are going to be going over the best settings for Apex Legends Season 24. Start off, we're going to go over all of the Apex settings themselves, the video settings, the gameplay settings, the audio settings, all of those. And then we're going to head into the Apex files for the video config, the settings.cfg, and an auto exec that is definitely going to help you guys get some better FPS and decrease your input latency. We're also going to be talking about launch options, how to install them, how to install the auto exec. And without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so starting off the gameplay settings here, we have the interact prompt style. Now we want to keep this on compact. Having this on default is a little bit more visual clutter that we generally don't want to have because of the larger screen size. Button hints, this is kind of a personal preference type of setting. If you want this off, you can turn this off. If you don't want this off, then keep that on. Realistically, it's more of just you being able to see the different button hints at the bottom of your screen. If it's something that you know already and you know all of your binds by heart, you don't need to like think about it whatsoever, then that's something that you could turn off and you may see some benefit from, but not really a very huge setting that you need to change, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Crosshair damage feedback, I have this turned off. This is just primarily for a physical like X crosshair when you're shooting people, as opposed to having nothing like I have. So continuing here, damage numbers, I keep this on stacking just so I can see the total number of damage that I've done to whoever I'm shooting at. This is something, again, that's personal preference, but in terms of visual clutter, stacking is what setting you want this to be on. Enemy health bar, you want this on. Now, this was a change that was made prior to my last settings video about 9 months ago, and this setting is kind of controversial because there's a lot of people that say that it's better to have it off, and there's a lot of people that say that it's better to have it on. I would say in terms of playing the game like a normal human being and being able to tell just how much health your enemy is on is a huge advantage outside of having to do the math in your head or not knowing how hurt they were to begin with. Ping opacity we have set to faded just so you can see through it. It's not anything too crazy. You can have this set to default if you want to, but faded is just an easier way to see if you have a bunch of pings on your map and you want to make sure that that doesn't block your vision if there's an enemy in that direction, for example. Enemy highlight, you want this to be enabled. This is for, I believe, the new assault class perk that just came out, so that if you are doing damage, then you highlight 5 opponents within 30 meters. This is definitely something you want to see just because it makes them easier to see. Obituaries, I have that on. That's just for your kill feed. You can have that off if you don't care about it, but it is very good to see for if you're playing ranked and you want to know if you're in a third-party scenario or if you're able to third-party something. You can watch for knocks, and that's something that people take advantage of all the time. So something you'll want to do as well. Minimap rotation, I have this on. This is, again, personal preference, but I personally like having the rotation on. It helps me understand where I'm at in the map a little bit better and what direction I'm going. So weapon auto cycle on empty. Turn this off, all right? You want this off. There's so many times where I have tried to swap my gun after I run out of ammo and it tries to auto switch to something else when in reality it's not really what I wanted it to go to. It can be helpful sometimes, but realistically I want to be the one that switches that weapon because any scenario that could completely mess you up. You could try and melee somebody and that could potentially cancel it because it's swapping the weapons, and then that could lose you the fight. Always sprint, I have that on. This is another personal preference type of thing, but for moving and my personal movement, the way that I play the game, my play style, our always sprint is definitely the way for me. I just don't really want to have to hold down a different key to be able to do that. I want to be running at all times. This is Apex Legends. We're usually running for our life. So something that I definitely want to have on personally, but we'll talk about a bind later on as to why some people may not want auto sprint or always sprint to be enabled, but may want to reconsider because of this. But we'll talk about that later. Auto run, I have that turned off. This is kind of like auto sprint, but it's not. I have this off just so it doesn't automatically run every time. Again, going back to that walk bind that we'll talk about later, just kind of keeping that off because there's some times where you do want to walk, like if you're in a bubble fight, for example. Jetpack glide control, this is again personal preference. If I'm being honest, for mouse and keyboard players, it may be better to have this set to toggle. But for me personally, I've kind of gotten used to the lifeline glide and the Valk jetpack being on hold, so that's just what I use personally. But play around with it, you know, try hold, try toggle, see what works better for you, and then kind of go from there. Incoming damage feedback, I have this set to 3D just so I can see a better indicator of where I'm getting shot from. If I'm being honest with you, the 2D damage feedback indicator is kind of hard to tell sometimes what direction it's coming from, and it's just not the most visually appealing thing in the world. So I go with 3D personally. If you guys want that on 2D, it does still work relatively well, but 3D is just a little bit better in my opinion. Taking damage closes death box or crafting menu. I cannot explain to you how important this setting is. If this setting is turned on, turn it off. This setting will literally get you killed so many times. If you're like me and you like to shield swap when you're in the middle of fights or right after you finish a fight and you know there's a third party coming, if you have this turned on and you go to hit that swap and you don't hit it in time before you get shot, it's going to automatically take you out of that death box. And that is not what you want, because at the end of the day, your goal is to hit that swap. And if that stops you from hitting it, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to die at that point. So make sure you have this setting turned off. Now, we have some new settings for the recent seasons here. I'm not sure if these were in the season 24 update or if they're in prior seasons, if I'm being honest with you. We have health and ammo pop-ups, which is more of like a critical health or low ammo message on your screen. They've gotten a little bit more sensitive, and they also made a setting for it, as you can see here. So I have this set to limited because I don't like to hear it or see it all the time. It does get pretty obnoxious with how much it's showing you. You could have a lot of ammo left and it'll tell you you're low on ammo. So I have this set to limited, so it only really appears if you're really hurt or if you don't have ammo at all, pretty much. You can turn this off as well if you want to, as well as the voice lines, because they did add voice lines for it, and God, are they annoying. There are so many voice lines for it, but it is very, very useful sometimes when you don't realize that you didn't pop a cell, or you didn't pop a syringe, or you just didn't realize you weren't healed in general, because there's a lot going on. It can very much help you in those situations, so I have this set to limited instead of off. But for some people, if you've been going crazy over the voice lines for healing and ammo, turn that off and you won't hear that anymore. Arsenal's map and HUD icons, I actually have this set to maximum. So in season 24, they released something called the Arsenal. And these are placed at pretty much every POI, and they come with set guns, set ammo, and you're able to upgrade your weapons. Now, these I have set to maximum, because if you're in any area and you're running out of ammo, if you have this turned off, you know, it's kind of not going to be great. There's none on the mini map, and there's only going to be 5 on your full map, which is something that I guess wouldn't be horrible, but in theory, you want to know where all of them are at just in case you need to go use it. You can turn this to moderate as well, and you'd probably be perfectly fine because it shows 2 on the mini map and 10 on the full map, but I want to see all of them, so I have them on max. Off-screen portraits, I have this turned on just because it looks nicer in my opinion. Hop-up, pop-up, I have this turned off, and this is for when you're looking over a hop-up or you pick one up, and it shows in the bottom right corner there what hop-up you have in this big little screen. Not really something I want to see all the time. I know what the hop-up I'm using does, so I have that turned off. Streamer mode, personal preference. This makes it to where nobody is showing the name of themselves for you, or just the killer in general. Your teammates will and other people in the game, but the killer will have no name. Anonymous mode, this makes your name hidden. I have this enabled just so nobody sees what my name is when I'm playing the game. Usage sharing, I have this disabled. Don't really care about having all of my data going to EA. Performance display, I have this turned on, and this just shows you your FPS, your ping, your packet loss, all that stuff in the top right. If you are a big streamer and you happen to be watching this, it may be beneficial to keep that turned off because people can stream snipe you based off of your ping. So something to keep in mind. There are a lot of times where I do have to turn this off if I am streaming. Sometimes I do get sniped, so I gotta keep that turned off with streamer mode enabled. But for most people, don't really have to worry about that, so I have that turned on just so I can monitor what my frame rate is. Communication filter, I have this set to everybody, so if anyone's in chat or game chat, then I'm able to hear everybody. Tutorial systems, you actually want this off. You don't, if you play the game, you've been playing it for a little bit now, you just want to get some good settings and you're coming to this video, you're usually not really worried about the tutorials in the game at that point, so you can turn those off, not really have to worry about those. Reticle, I'm still on a green crosshair like I was in my last settings video. I've just kind of rocked with it. It's very good to see different things. It doesn't blend in super crazy because of the colors in Apex. So I have 38, 255, 13. So if you want to run a green crosshair like this, go for it, and let me know what you think. Laser, I have set to default, which I know was yellow in my last settings video, but we're back on the red laser. Just like I said, kind of keeps a good visual clarity whenever I'm shooting. Any bright color, to be honest with you, will do really well for this. I've seen a lot of people run like a light blue or a yellow or even an orange. Anything that's bright, even pink, will help a lot for sure. Now for the accessibility settings, we're down to colorblind mode. I used to be on Tritanopia for this, but I have everything turned off from here on. I have no subtitles, no subtitle size. I don't have accessible chat features enabled, voice to text chat. You definitely want these guys off. This is all kind of just accessibility settings that most people don't need to use. If you need to have text chat as speech, or you want to have what your teammates are typing to you spoken to you, then you can turn that on, but not something that most people want most times. Now, going to the mouse and keyboard tab, all of my MK players, you're eating good today. All of my controller players, not so much, but we can still try and help you here. Now, for mouse and keyboard, I play on a 0.8 sensitivity on 1600 DPI. Now, if you don't know what any of the DPI and all that stuff means, you don't know what kind of mouse you have or what DPI goes up to, don't really worry about it. If you have a software for your mouse, open up that software, go into the settings, and go into the DPI settings. If you're on 800, this would be 1.6 800 DPI. If you want to switch to 1600, then copy this down, go to 0.8. For my ADS optic sensitivities, you can copy these guys down. If you don't want to copy these guys down, when I give you my files later in the video, you'll be able to pretty much copy and paste my files in, and it'll automatically give you these. So don't really have to worry about it too much. And a lot of these settings will do that. But if you want to copy them down for your own game without having to physically replace your files, copy these guys down. Mouse acceleration, you want this off. Some people play with acceleration on for fun. You just won't see a lot of benefit from this. It's one of the things where over time you build a muscle memory feeling of where your mouse needs to be. And if you're using acceleration, then that can be ever changing. And it's something that you won't really get used to. You can get good at it, don't get me wrong, but it takes a lot better or a lot longer to get good at. And it's just not really a beneficial setting in my opinion. Mouse invert, definitely want that off. Anyone who plays with mouse invert on, you need to learn how to play with it off, because that is definitely hurting you. There is no way you have fun playing with that setting on. Clamp mouse cursor to game window, you actually usually want this on. I haven't seen a lot of success with it working, but with the new DX12, it's very possible that I may be wrong on this now. I haven't done a lot of testing myself, but most times this is if like you are playing the game and you accidentally flick way too hard and it goes onto your other monitor, and then you click and it tabs you out, and it's just a whole thing. If you turn this on, it'll make it to where it doesn't leave this monitor. Now, for me, I'm on a single monitor setup, so it doesn't matter too much, but if you're on a double or triple monitor setup, this may benefit you there. Lighting effects, I have this turned off. This is just for, you know, your mouse, your keyboard, stuff like that to sync to your Apex stuff. Not really something most people want or care about, so I just have that turned off. Now, for the binds, I actually have some pretty standard binds with Apex. Nothing too crazy. Now, we have the standard WASD. We have the scroll wheel up for tap strafe, which if you don't do this on mouse and keyboard, why not? Do it. Sprint and toggle zoom, I have this set to caps lock because I don't use caps for anything else. Jump for spacebar, and then that is also my scroll wheel down. So anyone who's been playing Ash, if you scroll wheel down, it will dash you. So that is another thing that you kind of have to look out for. It's the same thing with like Valk. So it's the same thing with Valk or Lifeline, for example, where if you scroll wheel down like twice, you'll jump. So just something to keep in mind with that. It is a little bit harder with characters like that because of their jump. Not anything detrimental. You just kind of have to get used to that. Now we have crouch toggle on C and crouch hold on left control. Now this is mainly for super gliding. So like if I go up to this, I'm hitting space and C as opposed to space and control, because space and control is a lot more unreliable. In fact, I can like barely hit super glides with that. So space and C is what I use personally. Now, if you like doing super glides and like doing movement stuff, this is a little bit personal preference. You can change this to V or even B if the bind feels better for you. So just kind of something to keep in mind with that. Inventory, tab, or I, those are also default. I pretty much have default everything on this. I would say the only thing that's different is my left alt survival item. And then I have inspect on mouse button 5 and push to talk on mouse button 4. We do have a left shift bind for walk, which I'll talk about in my files later on. But that is pretty much going to do it for the mouse and keyboard section here. Now for the controller setting. I do not play controller. There are times where I do play controller. There are times where I mess around on controller, but for the most part, not really a controller player. Not really something I really cared to do. Hi, so Editor Forby here. I plugged in my controller and it immediately cut my mic out. So the key takeaways that we're gonna have from this controller section here is play on linear response curve. If you have stick drift on the linear response curve, turn it up to a small dead zone off of none and play either 7-6 or 6-5, 5-4, 4-4, 4-3, any of those senses, and your aim should be a little bit better on this game overall. That's the key takeaways from this. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but let's move on to the next section. Moving on to the video settings, the most important part. Now, a lot of these are going to be settings, again, that are going to be in the files. But if you want to just copy these down, then feel free here. Now, we play on full screen mode with DX12 being full release now for Apex Legends. The full screen option is very, very nice to have. It's very easy to tab out without your screen going black for a solid 15 seconds, regardless if you're on stretch res or not. I play on 1610 1920 by 1200. Now, what this means is this is essentially the equivalent to 1728 by 1080. This is stretch res. However, it's not super stretch res. It's 1610 as opposed to 16:9. So now I play on 1440p, which is why I'm on the 1920 by 1200 option. However, if you're on a 1080p monitor, I did leave a folder, and we'll talk about that later, with the 1728 by 1080 resolution in it. Now, if you have an NVIDIA graphics card and you haven't done that, look up a video on how to set up a stretch res with NVIDIA graphics cards. If you are an AMD user, look up a video about CRU and how to stretch on AMD graphics cards. If you are playing on 1440p, 1920 by 1200 should be a default resolution. If it's not a default resolution, you can set that up for 1440p, but this is what I use, and it keeps it pretty high quality. But moving forward, I stay on a 45% brightness. Going to a high brightness on this game honestly makes it pretty hard to see certain things. It just makes it too bright. Keeping it on a lower brightness like that just has a good contrast in terms of colors, so it makes it a little bit easier to distinguish things from a far distance. Field of view, I play on 110, but I actually play on 120, and we will talk about that later with the files, as I've said before. FOV ability scaling, we have this set to disable. This makes your FOV consistent regardless if you're an Octane stim or you have some type of speed boost. Trim view shake, I have this set to minimal, just so there isn't a ton of shake happening on my screen at all times. If I get naded or there's explosions or whatever, keeps the screen shake to a minimum, especially while you're sprinting. VSync, I have this set to disabled. Generally don't want this on. Some people see some benefit from like triple buffered or adaptive, but most times you want this off. NVIDIA Reflex, I have this enabled plus boost. Most people are going to have this on plus boost. If you have an insane system, maybe having this on enabled could benefit you a little bit more, but boost works great for me. Resolution FPS target, keep that to 0. Anti-aliasing, none. Texture streaming budget, this is the only setting that truly matters for the way that your game looks, okay? In terms of the actual quality of the textures around you and on your guns and on your hands and your skin and all of that, this is the setting that matters. So if you have a really good GPU, you can turn this up. But there isn't a lot of differences between a low VRAM budget and a high VRAM budget. There are some people who will argue that regardless of what setting you're on, the FPS isn't that different, and or that you get lower FPS on lower graphics. If you're on all the way low and you're on a good machine, yeah, you may see a little bit of performance drop there. But that's where you kind of find a middle ground based on what your card is and turn it up just a little bit. Now, you don't have to be on ultra or very high. You know, the settings do look pretty good, but I don't know about you. There is not a big difference between what I just changed and going back down to the low VRAM settings. There is truly not that much difference. Filtering, we have set to bilinear. Ambient occlusion quality, we have set to disabled. And literally every other setting, spot shadow detail, volumetric lighting, dynamic spot shadows, model detail, map detail, effects detail, and impact marks are all set to low. Every setting is set to the absolute lowest on this tab except for texture streaming budget. So now for audio settings, this is all going to kind of be individual personal preference. But if you want what I have, I generally play, except when I'm in the range, because it's really loud for some, it's just so loud. I have this set to 50 most times, but in the range, I have it set down to between like 5 and 10. Output device, you want this to be whatever goes into your headphones, and then you want your output configuration to generally be stereo. Mono is a single channel, not really something you want to see. It could just be one side of your headphones at that point. So stereo is what you want most times. Voice chat input device, you want this set to whatever your microphone is. Definitely, please, I speak for all the teammates in the world, go on push to talk. No one wants to hear you yap, all right? Unless you're talking to your team and you're being a nice guy, that's okay. But if you're just yapping and you're talking to your girlfriend, your kid, and you're eating chips and watching TV in the background, shut up. Open mic record threshold, you can turn that pretty low. It just makes it to where, like, wherever your mic can be heard at. So if you want to be heard, you usually want that on the lowest. Incoming voice chat volume, I have that set to 100%. You can turn that lower or higher based on how loud it feels for you, but that's a perfect amount for me. Sound effects volume 40%, dialogue volume 46%, just so I can hear when I'm getting a third-party voice line. Music volume 0, I don't want to hear all that. Lobby music volume, definitely 0. I don't want to hear all that. Gameplay volume while spectating. This is a very important setting because for some people it can be great, for some people it's not. For me, whenever I die, I want my volume to go down. I don't want to hear everything super loud because I'm dead. I don't really care to. Now, the reason why this is beneficial is because if you have that turned all the way down and you're tabbed out with sound in background turned on, for example, then if the game all of a sudden gets really loud, you know that you just got revived or rezzed. Emote preview sound, just the emote sound effects to play when previewing in the lobby. This is just a funny little setting. I have this turned on. You can turn that off if you want to, but that's not too important of a setting. But that just about does it for the settings in Apex itself. Now, that should feel pretty familiar to if you've seen any of my other settings videos, anything else that I've made. Not a lot has changed in that sense. Some stuff has changed, but nothing too drastic. We just have some new settings that we wanted to cover. Now, normally I would talk about the NVIDIA control panel settings and the 3D settings within that and how that can benefit your FPS. But based on what I've seen here in the last year or so, there hasn't been a lot of benefit. In fact, there has been benchmarks with the NVIDIA control panel before and after some changes in there, and there really hasn't been any benefit at all from what I've seen. So we'll skip that. Just a little bit less work for you guys to get some better FPS today. So let's go ahead and hop into the Apex files aspect of this video, and we'll take a look at those. Now, for the files portion of this video, there's a couple different directories that we need to go into. Now, one of them is going to be into your users, your name, and then into saved games, respawn, Apex, profile. Profile, this is where your profile.cfg folder is, and this is where pretty much all of your binds and different settings in the actual game are going to be. Now, if you want all of my settings one-to-one, copy and paste this in and you'll get all of them. This is primarily for like your mouse and keyboard settings, your HUD settings, all that different things. Like pretty much everything that we just went over besides the video settings are going to be in here. So if you want to copy those down or copy this, feel free. I will leave the file in the description. You can paste it in here. I'll even leave the file location for you. And you're able to paste that in there. Now, in the same Apex folder, we go into local and we go into videoconfig.txt. Now, I'm going to have two different video configs for you guys in this video. One of them is going to be what I use, which is the 2560 by 1440 resolution, 1440p, with a 1920 by 1200 resolution. This is what anyone with 1440p realistically should be using for stretch res in theory. Now, if you are on 1080p, I have a different folder for you, and you'll find that in the 1080p video config folder. And this file has 1080p as the standard resolution with 1728 by 1080. Like I was talking about earlier, look up a CRU video if you are on an AMD card. If you're not, go into your control panel and make a custom resolution. If you don't know how to do that, look up a video. I'm positive there are multiple out there that are great. Make this resolution, and this should be one of the best resolutions you can play on 1080p, in my opinion. It's a res that I played on the entire time I was on 1080p, and I loved it. Now, in the same local folder here, we have settings.cfg. This is going to be where all of the binds and stuff are. Now, realistically, we have two binds that I really want to tell you guys about. One of them being the left shift bind, and this was the walk bind that I was talking about earlier. So with left shift, that allows me to hold left shift and walk forward without auto sprint taking over. That means if I'm in a bubble fight, for example, and I don't want to be sprinting to where my shotgun has that delay, then I'm able to hold that left shift bind and just kind of jiggle walk in and out of a bubble without having to worry about that delay. It's incredibly useful for those kind of fights, and it also helps a lot if you want to walk up to a fight without being heard. On top of that bind, just like the last video that I had, we have the F key binds for FPS changes. So if you have, no matter what system you have, there is a bind here that will help you for your refresh rate. So if you're on a 360 hertz refresh rate, you can play on 300 FPS or 240 FPS. If you're on a 180 refresh rate or 190 refresh rate, you can go 180. If you're on 165, there's a 165, 144, there's a 144. And then if you're on anything lower, 60 hertz or anything like that, you can use these binds here. And then 30 FPS is just there just in case. Most people won't want to use this, but I stay in the 240 FPS range primarily. And we do have a launch option that I'll talk about that keeps it locked to 237. But if I ever need to clip something and it changes what FPS I'm at, I can just change that back right away. Now, F12 should actually use the auto exec or apply the auto exec, but I'm not sure that this has been working. I am going to leave it in there just in case, but realistically, there is a good possibility that this does not work anymore. It's honestly hard to say. But yeah, this is all of my settings. Like I was saying earlier, if you wanted to copy and paste this, you can get the ADS sensitivity. All the scaling is in here as well. These are kind of the primary ones you need to worry about, but there is one more file that we truly care about that all of us are here for, and that is the auto exec. Now, the auto exec lives in your game's home. So wherever your Apex Legends game is where it's going to be. In me, it's on my separate SSD under my Apex file in CFG, and it's autoexec.cfg. Now, again, this file will be in the description for you guys to download. This is what is really going to give you the most FPS difference. Now, there are a couple things I want to talk about in this. Primarily, that we have CL FOV scale 1.7. Now 1.7 is the 120 FOV that I was talking about. If you don't want this to be 1.7, you can just delete this command entirely and save this, and you will be on the standard 110 FOV. You don't have to worry about it. Now, this is not bannable. This auto exec is not bannable. It never has been bannable. Anyone who tells you it's bannable is wrong. There are certain things that you can put in auto execs that are bannable, but this auto exec does not have any of it, and it is entirely safe to use. I've been using this auto exec and different versions of it since I started playing the game 4.5 to 5 years ago. It's not something you guys have to worry about. There's no cheating involved. It's fine. Everybody uses this, I promise. Realistically, this just has a ton of different graphic settings in it. And then if you scroll all the way down, there are some different connection settings, and it tells you what each of them does. A lot of these will say placebo, like the health wheel use on release. That actually isn't relevant anymore, so we can delete that guy. There shouldn't be any more placebos in this or non-working commands in this. And one thing that I was experiencing with my last auto exec before this revision was when you launch the game for a solid minute or two, it would just run really laggy and have some input delay, and then it would all of a sudden clear itself up. I have not experienced that on this auto exec, not even a single time. So anyone who is experiencing that before should not be having that anymore. This auto exec will get you frames, and it will reduce your input lag. So definitely something to use. This is like the most important file out of all of them in terms of actually getting that benefit. And all right, that just about does it for all of the files and settings. One last thing I want to talk to you guys about is the actual command lines on either Steam or EA, Epic Games, whatever you're playing on. I actually don't think Epic Games has command lines, so if you're playing on Epic, skip this part. My last settings video had a lot more than this, but I've kind of simplified it down to what we need and what we want to use out of all of those. And essentially all we want is plus exec autoexec.cfg, plus CL is soften locale 1. And what this does is it makes it to where the blood that's in the game is now a red flare. Dash dev, which takes away the intro screen. It just kind of skips you directly to the sign in screen on Apex, makes it the launch a little bit quicker. And then FPS max 237. This is what I was saying earlier, where I cap it with the command line or the launch option. This just makes it to where it's a little bit more consistent as opposed to hitting 240. Having your frame rate a little bit lower than the refresh rate division than you're supposed to be doing can decrease input latency and just keep the consistency of your frame times. So I have this set to 237. Definitely something to keep in mind. If you notice a difference, then definitely run this. If you don't notice a difference, then maybe it doesn't affect you too much. But realistically, I have set mine set 3 frames lower than it should be. And all right, that just about does it for all of the settings here for season 24. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you guys drop a like and subscribe. I know this video was a little bit longer than the previous settings videos I have made, if you have seen those. If you did watch all the way into the end, I appreciate you so much. If you did enjoy the content, make sure to keep an eye out. I will be dropping a Marvel Rivals settings video here soon, and you guys will be seeing a little bit more content regarding Marvel Rivals. But I love you guys. Thank you guys for hanging out. You guys have a good rest of your day. Peace out.